Everybody, and welcome to the Stroke Empowerment podcast series. I am very honoured this morning to have a special guest with me, my co-author in the book Finding Yourself After Stroke, Jodi O'Connell. Jodi is a survivor of a brainstem stroke, but I will let her tell you all about it. Welcome, Jodi, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Letitia, and I'm honoured to be on the call with you too. So we're both honoured. Awesome. So would you like me to dive into a little bit about what has happened or what my stroke experience is?
Tell us a little bit about you, Jodi O'C, before the
Sure.
stroke.
Sure. So I was a single mum. Well, I am a single mum. I think you're always a single mum. And worked full time as a practice manager at an accounting firm. As far as how I looked after my body, I wasn't very diligent in that. So I was a smoker, and I would class myself as a binge drinker. And I kind of ate what I wanted, drank a lot of Coke Zero. That was my coffee. My health and looking after my health wasn't high on my priority list. And I feel like, I guess, when you reflect back, that I was pretty much in survival mode, existence mode, just doing what needed to be done to get through the day, which I think can happen for non-single mums as well, kind of in that child rearing year where everything's about the kids and you're just a robot, pretty
How old
much.
were your kids at that time?
Just before the stroke, 11 and 15.
Mm-hmm.
So, they were still pretty young. And I was still pretty full on parenting along with fitting in full-time work and that sort of stuff. Very ambitious as far as work goes, but it was all about providing for my family.
So a bit stressful and just on
Yeah,
that hamster wheel of life, going through the motions every day.
pretty much. Although, would I call it living? Probably not so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think you said it well when you said single mum in survival mode, doing what she's got to
yeah,
do.
yeah, big time.
Yeah. And so that's what life looked for you. What about the day or moments prior to, because you've got quite a bit of a story about what happened prior to your stroke. So you want to tell us
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned previously, I was a smoker. And 3 days prior to my stroke, I went to the doctors and he was kind of giving me a bit of a health check, and he's rapping me over the knuckles for still smoking, and was kind of like, okay, so that we've talked about giving up. So how are you going with that? And I said, oh, I'm really going shit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think I need a scare or something. Like, tell me I've got emphysema or something like that, just to sort of shock me into giving up. Um, and he's like, I can't do that, and blah blah blah. So I sort of said it as an off the cuff remark, but there was truth in it.
Mm-hmm.
That I needed something fairly significant to cut off this, well, because it was an addiction too. And we all know addictions in survival mode are fairly common.
Yeah.
Um, and so, later that day, I had booked in because I'd had a bit of a headache and my neck felt like it was out. So I had booked in to see my osteopath.
Mm-hmm.
Went in to see him, and he did the old crack of the neck, which kind of made it feel okay. And then, went about my business. And then I think it was 3 days later, the morning of, I went in for a massage as well. So just to loosen up what the osteo had did. So deep tissue massage, so that was all good. And then because I worked for an accounting firm and it was the 30th of June, we had our end of financial year breakup. So dressed up, got smart, got out, and got on it.
Yeah.
And partied, and yeah, and then came home, I think, and it was about 2 o'clock in the morning when I was trying to sort of go to sleep, and I rolled over and I just felt this really warm sensation sort of in my neck, which I'm picturing was the blood. And yeah, I felt numb down my left side. My vision was blurry. But because I was intoxicated a bit at the time too, I'm kind of like, oh, I'm not sure. So I got up and stumbled down the hallway, and I noticed that I was kind of going, like, really needing support along the wall. And I thought, it feels really weird. My face feels weird. And yeah, I managed to go to the toilet, came back and got back into bed, and I'm like, the only thing I can think of is that my drink's been spiked when I've been out, and thank goodness I'm home. So I'll just sleep it off and I'll be fine. And then tossed and turned, and then my brain started ticking, going, hang on a minute, there's something else this could be. So I was kind of like, okay. I did feel a droopiness in my face, but when I looked in the mirror, it was really strange. So the kind of vision impairment I had at that moment was, if I squinted one eye, I could see kind of clearly. So I had gone to the mirror because I'm like, my face feels funny, but when I looked in the mirror, I couldn't identify any droopiness, but it felt droopy.
Was it pins and needles or anything?
No, it just felt odd. Like it felt like my mouth should kind of really be drooped down.
Yeah.
So I was kind of surprised when I squinted and looked, and my face appeared quite normal.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so laying in bed, I'm like, okay, what else could this be? And then I'm like, oh, I've heard that stroke can be kind of like that, but my face isn't actually drooping. And so I decided that I should get it checked out, even if it was my drink being spiked. So I rang my next door neighbour, who was my best friend. She wasn't home, and devastated to this day that she wasn't home. She's devastated. So I rang my sister, who also lived local, and kind of said, oh, can you come over and take me to the hospital? Something's not quite right. And upon hearing my symptoms, she's like, no, I'm calling the ambulance and I'll meet them there. So the ambulance came, and there were two men, and they almost played good cop, bad cop. So one of them was kind of like, oh, what did you get up to tonight? And that sort of thing. And I said, oh, I've been out. And they're like, well, and the other guy sort of said, well, what recreational drugs have you taken? You've clearly taken something. And I'm like, Shiraz. That's all I've taken. And he's like, you may as well tell us now what you've taken, because we're going to find out when we get to the hospital anyway. So they were convinced that I'd taken a recreational drug. So then that was like, oh, it can't be stroke then, if that's what they think it is. I must have had my drink spiked. It is some kind of drug. Got to the hospital, and they asked me whether I had suffered migraines. And I said to them, I've never had a migraine in my life, but my sister suffers from them. And whichever doctor I spoke to is kind of like, okay, well, it must be migraine then. So they doped me up with migraine medication, which made me violently ill. So I was basically spent the next day or two sleeping and vomiting. Sleeping, and then when I woke, vomiting. When I awoke, I know that they kept asking me to do the smile and that sort of thing, and squeeze hands, and they tried to get me to sit up. And when they did, I was just so nauseous from, I'm guessing, from the medication. And at one point, a doctor was going to send me home. Luckily, a nurse argued with him and was basically, she cannot go home in this state.
How long
So
was it, Jodi, at this point, from you being at home after the work party and realizing, oh, something's not right here, and then getting to
yeah,
hospital and to where you are now? So, how much time had passed?
I think that it's really hard because it was 11 years ago.
Mhm.
I'm thinking, so it was around 2 o'clock in the morning when the symptoms started. I think by the time I got to hospital, it would have been probably about 5 a.m.
Mhm.
in the
Oh, that's
morning.
quite quick. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but as I said, the next day, like from 5 a.m. till whenever, I was treated for migraine.
Yeah.
They did give me a CT scan, but only after it was sort of like, it's a migraine, and um, this migraine will last 24 hours. And it was only after that 24 hours that they're kind of like, oh, she's still got symptoms. Let's explore further. So they gave me a CT scan, to which nothing actually showed up. And then they booked me in for an MRI, but that couldn't happen until the Monday morning. So, yeah, effectively, still had no idea what it was until after the MRI. Didn't get the MRI results back for maybe a day or two either. So, potentially, there was quite a few days where it's kind of like, what is it? Um, and yeah, the MRI showed up that I had actually had a stroke. So
And the, oh,
the
sorry.
correct terminology for what I had
Mhm.
was a brainstem CVA secondary to vertebral artery dissection.
Right. Mhm.
So
And
once, sorry, you go.
I was
Once,
just going to say, during those few days while you're in hospital and waiting for your results and diagnosis, was your symptoms improving at all or worsening, or were you just
no,
staying the
I
same?
was staying the same.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the symptoms basically were, by the time I got to the hospital, and again, knowing that I was drugged up for the first 24 hours, um, my symptoms were basically complete double vision, like I could not see.
Mhm.
And I could not focus on anything. It hurt my eyes to try and focus. I could still talk and I could still understand. I couldn't walk, and I had I wouldn't say I was completely numb down the left side of my body, but there was delayed sensitivity down the left side.
Mhm.
And I also had numbness in my face in different areas. So there was a numbness. It was odd because after I knew what it was and that the stroke had occurred in the right side, the fact that majority of my symptoms were down the left, understandably, but I had numbness under my nose on the right side, and numbness around my right eye, and some numbness in my forehead. So the facial stuff was kind of right side, and everything else was left. Um, so yeah, I found it interesting, I guess, once they diagnosed stroke, that I could still talk.
Mm.
My face hadn't drooped at all, but my pupils were very different. So one was normal and the other was like a pin prick, pin head. So that looked really odd. Even though my face still felt like it drooped. And potentially when they were getting me to smile, it may have still drooped, but to just look, not that I could see properly, but when people like friends came in, they couldn't see a droop or anything like that. So kind of my perception of what a stroke was all about was kind of shattered.
Yeah. And prior to experiencing it yourself, did you think for 1 minute that young people could have strokes?
I had heard that they could, but it was more, what did I kind of associate it with? Um, I guess I associated it more with maybe if they had a trauma or an accident or something like that,
Mhm.
that the stroke wasn't the primary thing. The stroke
Yeah.
was like a secondary to something.
And did you ever
Um,
think that you would ever be at risk?
Never,
Yeah.
never. Even though I knew the risks of smoking and all that sort of stuff. But when the doctors came to tell me it was a stroke, their very first question was, have you been involved in an accident or trauma or had a neck manipulation or anything like that done in the last week? So mine effectively, I had high blood pressure, which puts me at a high risk, in a high risk category anyway, but primarily they were looking at and pointing at the neck adjustment, which is more a trauma
Trauma. Yeah.
related stroke
Mhm.
than a natural kind of high blood pressure smoker. But I believe it was all linked. Like, if I didn't have the high blood pressure and wasn't a smoker, then potentially the neck adjustment may not have caused it. Um, that said, too, I'm a universal thinker, and I did ask for for a scare from the doctor
I
to
was
give
just
up
thinking
smoking
that.
3 days earlier. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, everything kind of fit into place to give me what I asked for.
But did you think that at the time?
Um, no, not well. I thought it while I was in hospital because I remember my doctor came in.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how. So he came in because he had heard what had happened,
Mhm.
and yeah, so he came in and to check on me, and it must have been about a week or so later, and he sort of said, oh goodness, what's happened and that sort of stuff. And I remember saying to him, do you remember I actually asked for this?
Yeah.
Sort of half joking. um and he just shook his head at me like I was a lunatic. But yeah, so it wasn't long. Like I did, yeah, it wasn't something I woke up with 6 months later and thought, oh my God, that's right, I asked for this. It was pretty front of mind at the time.
And
And
how was,
even when it came to, because like I was a smoker,
mm,
so I had friends come in that smoked and that sort of stuff, and I'm kind of like, and so I was in the withdrawals of smoking at the time too, and I was kind of like, oh my God, I want a cigarette. But um, yeah, there was something around that as well, because to me it was like I pictured having like even a puff would be like going, thanks for the second chance, universe. And I was
yeah.
I was not prepared to do that.
Yeah.
So there was a fairly swift understanding or linkage to it all for
And
me
how,
not to push that.
yeah. How was, yeah, I totally get that. How was your friends and children and family, like your sister in particular? How was their response to you finding out that you'd had a stroke and it wasn't the um, suspected drink spiking or migraine that they
Mm.
thought once you'd been admitted to hospital?
So my sister initially went into carer mode. She's like, I'm going to give up work and I'm going to look after you and the kids and all that sort of thing. My boys were obviously devastated. I still remember when they came into the hospital, I was like laying there, and they both came in and both like either side and just fell on me and sobbed. Oh, It was absolutely heartbreaking. And I was a mum that would like protected my kids from seeing me upset, and do you know what I mean? Like all that
Yeah.
sort of thing. So yeah, it was heart-wrenching. So that, and I don't know that they fully understood what the implications were. My mum came down and stayed from Darwin, stayed for a while, just while I was in hospital, and kind of she was my secretary. Like she sort of came in and said, okay, what do we need to organize as far as home life and finances and all that sort of stuff goes. So
That's great.
everyone kind of took a role. Yeah,
Yeah.
so lucky, so lucky.
Yeah.
I had a friend who came in and literally just came in, and every time she came in, she did something pretty for me, like painted my nails or like just to make me feel good. And then once I got home, well, I remember actually because the meeting that I had with the hospital staff before they sent me home, I think I had there my myself, my kids, my sister, my mum, my ex-husband, his parents, and my best friend. They had to move it to a bigger room than they expected, because this was literally my support network.
That is
Um,
fantastic that you had such a
yes,
strength to come around you,
absolutely.
even at a time like that, to have your ex and his parents support you as well. That's just, it says so much
Yeah.
about everyone and who they are as people to continue to support you in such uncertain times, not knowing, how long recovery is going to take, and
Yeah.
got that
Yeah.
village around you to help you with your children.
I definitely identify how lucky I was. I know a lot of people don't have that. And that definitely helped in my recovery.
Mm.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, how long did you spend in rehab? Did you go to rehab?
So
I can't remember.
I I I didn't I had a rehab program.
Hmm.
Um, no, that's a lie. I did do a bit of rehab once I got home, but once I diagnosed stroke, then I was put into the general admission, like general hospital,
Hmm.
where they gave me like an OT and physio and that sort of stuff. So I had a rehab program, but I was in the general ward.
Hmm.
So I was in there for 27 days. They had said I'd be in for 3 months. So I'm like, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
done.
I'm going home.
Yeah. And but after that, I had like outpatient rehab support.
Mhm.
And so that, yeah, that went on for quite a significant amount of time. Um, yeah.
Yeah. So pre-stroke, Jodi was
Mhm.
um, a single mum who was working and taking care of herself and her kids, and then all of a sudden, stroke is interrupted. How long was it before you were able to return to driving and work and a somewhat
Yeah.
normal post-stroke life?
Hmm. So driving was about 6 months. Um, and with that, I still had to go for regular vision test and get approval from my optometrist that I was capable of driving. Um, and it was mainly around because I lost peripheral vision in my right eye. So I had to learn to kind of overcompensate
Can I just
for
ask,
that.
did that improve, or have you still got that visual field
I've
deficit
still
there?
got that.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
it's gone. Yeah. But as I said, I've just developed habits to compensate for that. And work. was a tough one because I was so fatigued. That out of everything, fatigue was the most debilitating thing for me. Once I learned to walk and like do all that sort of stuff again and could see again, fatigue. Oh gosh. So work-wise, I I think I was off work for 8 months. And then I started back and they let me start back at half a day a week and then built up from there. And when I was doing full days, I was I had, because we had interview rooms with couches, I would go and actually have a sleep in my lunch break
And
to
you had
rejuvenate.
amazing support from your employer as
Oh,
well throughout this time.
incredible, incredible financial, like, yeah, the lot. So they, um, because they obviously knew I was a single mom and had a mortgage and all that sort of thing, they continued to pay me my full-time wage even though I wasn't working. I did have income protection, but that's only like 70% of your income, and that took ages and ages to come through. So they just kept paying me like I wasn't an employee, and we just made it that when I got the income protection payments, I would pay them, they would pay me my full, and then once I returned to the deal was once I returned to full-time work, then I would pay installments to kind of pay them back for that extra bit of money. So I had the added bone. If you could write the recipe for dream support and a dream experience of such a life altering / shattering experience, I know I'm so lucky, because I didn't have to worry about money at all. Like,
Yeah,
money was still coming in, I could still pay everything. And yeah, I didn't have that added stress of, oh my God, how am I going to, cover this? How am I going to pay my mortgage? All that sort of stuff was taken away by having really, really supportive bosses.
that's incredible. It'd be great if everybody was that supportive and understanding, because
Yeah, big
finances
time.
are something that does impact quite a lot of survivors of stroke if they can't return to their place of employment.
Yeah. And it literally gave me the opportunity to really just concentrate on me.
Yeah, on your recovery without the stress.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's pretty universal knowledge that when you take away that stress, your body can recover a lot quicker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So apart from the visual field um, impairment there, is there any other residual challenges that you have? Do you still have fatigue now?
Yeah. So I still have delayed sensitivity down my left side.
Mhm.
Um, and I'd say it's still less sensitive too. So it's less sensitive than my right, and the message that comes through is delayed.
Mhm.
I definitely have the right side peripheral, and I still have numbness in that eye too. So I find it really hard to like wear mascara or eyeliner because I don't know when I'm poking myself in the eye. Especially now I'm getting old and my eyesight's not good either, so I can't really see that well. Um, and fatigue is definitely one that comes up when I push myself to. So that's kind of my flag to like, okay, self-care, come on, bring
Yeah.
it back.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And
because it's still,
um, what do you do for self-care when that fatigue is coming on? Like sometimes it can just hit you, but sometimes you're aware of what your signs are before you get to that point. So tell
yeah,
us what does it look like for you, and what do you do for self-care?
yeah. So fatigue for me when it comes on, it's fairly, I mean, I have my fatigue stages throughout each day anyway. I would say 3 p.m.'s a pretty significant
Mhm.
sort of time period. I make sure that any complex tasks or anything that I have to be right on point for are always done in the morning.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a brain fog. And when I explain it to people that don't quite understand fatigue, they think it's just tiredness, but it's like, it's not even it's not physical. It's like your brain just goes, nope, I'm not doing it anymore. And yeah, so for me, I think when stress and overwhelm happens, my understanding is that obviously our neuro pathways are rewiring differently after stroke, that it takes a lot more energy. My doctor described it really well. He said, okay, so in order to get up and walk over there, you used to just go A to B, done. Now, A to B is now withered or doesn't work properly. So in order to do that same thing, you have to go A, C, D.
Yeah.
And so the extra work the brain is doing for normal function is more tiring for it. And that's what it feels like too. And that's
Yeah.
why I guess the complex stuff in the mornings when you're kind of a bit more fresh and that sort of stuff makes sense. But yeah, in the afternoons, yeah, it's like you glaze over a lot more. It's a lot harder to multitask. And for me, to combat that is the important thing is to listen to your bloody body.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I have tried to push through, and instead of requiring, a half-hour lay down, pushing through means that you need 2 days to recover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely
Um,
agree with that.
yeah. So, but I have found too that if I don't necessarily, because I can't always sleep kind of 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but even either going for a gentle walk and having an actual brain break and getting some fresh air helps. And even doing like a meditation or something like that also helps. Anything that's actually a proper brain break away that brings you back into your body, out of your head, that involves breathing and regulating and that sort of stuff is all really helpful during those fatigue times. But yeah, the biggest thing is listen. Do listen. Yeah.
And so you're 11 years post now.
Mm.
What advice would you give to other people who are just starting out on their stroke recovery? So they've just found out they've had a stroke, they're going through some uncertain times.
Mm.
What advice would you give to people in their early days?
That's a really good question. My biggest thing is to just be really gentle with yourself. It can be really, really hard to not get frustrated with the limitations you're now experiencing.
Mhm.
Really hard to not play the burden story in your head, that I'm a burden on everyone. And there's we all go through that. I'm not saying don't think it, because we all do. It's part of the grieving process, and allowing that grieving process, like to look at people who are of positive mind frame and have changed their mindset and have learnt to embrace, the stroke experience and that sort of thing, is great to sort of look at, but don't judge yourself and compare yourself to that, because there's still such a journey to go through to get to that, if that's where you end up. Mindset is freaking everything.
Mhm.
And whilst it's like I went through depression, I went through the grief, I didn't want to get out of bed, it was almost a blessing that I had my kids, because otherwise I could have just curled up in a fetal position and just not moved. The fact that I still had to be a mother and I had to um, was a pure blessing, as well as freaking hard work. Um,
Yeah, As we know, stroke doesn't stop for kids and our
No,
life still
it
keeps going
doesn't.
on.
Yeah, yeah. I think that to not, I guess the biggest part of mindset too is determining which category you want to live your life in. Whether it's the why me group, as in, why me? Why did this happen to me?
Mm-hmm.
Or the, why am I still here? What, like, what reason am I still here? They're the two groups that I've kind of identified. I've played with both extensively.
Mm-hmm.
Um, my comfort zone is the why am I still here? Because I did live in a little bit of the why me as part of the grieving and that sort of thing, but I did not want to live there. I
Yeah.
knew I knew early on the fact that the universe had assisted to give me the scare that I needed to give up smoking and that sort of stuff. It's like I'm here, and the abilities that I've been left with, gifted with, like that's not an accident.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to just go, thanks for the second chance, universe. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
So tell us a bit about, we'll wrap up in it very shortly, but tell us about some of the great things that you've been doing, um, with your gratitude, and you've co-authored a
sure.
book, and things that you might have coming up that has really helped you find your passion and purpose post-stroke.
Yeah, sure. So, basically, once I got into the whole why am I still here, I made it kind of a mission and an adventure to find out why. Not to take it too seriously and beat myself up if I couldn't come up with a purpose, but just do it with from a space of curiosity. It's kind of like, okay, if I am still here for a reason, what can I do and who do I be, and do I even know who I am,
Mm-hmm.
in order to make this difference that I have no idea what it is yet. But
Yeah.
and so I kind of just grasped every personal development kind of opportunity that came my way, because again, I was very universal message orientated by then. It's kind of like, oh, this has come up for a reason. That sounds really interesting. I'll do that. Of course, money is a factor. So that's still, it was kind of like, I'd really love to do it, but I can only afford $10 a week. If you really want me to do it, you'll have to accept that. Um, and the more that I guess accepted and embraced that, the more opportunities came, of course, because then you're in attraction, and part of I guess the opportunities that came up, I believe, is from my energy and my vibe of gratitude. So with the whole why am I still here came and recognizing that my life is a gift, and that, I'm grateful to still be here. I'm grateful to still mother my kids. I've been here to meet my grandson and all
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. So it's just yeah, gratitude features so strongly in my life each and every day. And so from that space, it's like it's an abundance mindset,
Mm-hmm.
because you can't be grateful and, well, it's hard to be grateful and in scarcity at the same time.
Right.
Um, so because, yeah, if you're grateful for what you have, you get more of what you have, instead of wanting and needing and forever, grass is greener on the other side kind of thing. Um, So as far as, yeah, so I've had a couple of podcasts, people who have, like, I think it's the gratitude app. I don't even know. I signed up for a gratitude app to sort of post my gratitudes each day, and I was nominated to be the I don't know, the gratitude sharer of the month. And I got to speak to the creator of the app as the based on my gratitude
That's incredible.
rituals and that sort of stuff. Yeah, it was really cool. I felt
Congrats.
very honored.
Yeah.
And from that too, because I tended to use my Facebook page as a bit of a journal. And so I would post my gratitudes on there sort of daily, and ended up like I'd get responses back and it's like, oh, that's right. Other people have access to this. So it wasn't even oh, I'm going to put it out there and change the world for people. It's kind of like, oh my God, that meme or that picture or that story really touched me, and this is what I'm grateful for. And it's, yeah. So out of that, I'm thinking, and based on people's responses, and I quite often got kind of personal messages sort of saying, oh, the one you posted today really struck me and really touched me, and it's impacted me, and a really beautiful feedback. So I figure I need to broaden the reach of those messages, and so I'm planning to do a book.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah. Yes, so I am pretty excited about that because I believe that what we put out to the universe, we receive back. So putting something beautiful out like that, if it can help other people like it has for the people that have reached out and told me about it, then yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
Sure is. That
Yeah,
is beautiful. And I love that. I love that you're looking at the blessings, counting your blessings along the way.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so
So
much. Oh, sorry. Do you want to
that's
add
okay.
anything? Yeah.
There's just one more thing because it's been coming up a bit lately for me.
Mhm.
I get quite a few people in the stroke support groups and that sort of thing asking me whether I've returned to normal, and that's
Okay.
what I class normal as, like, have I fully recovered?
Mhm.
Um, and so I don't know any stroke survivor that goes back to being the version they were pre-stroke.
Mhm.
That can be a good thing, bad thing, however you want to look at it. I think the struggle, and this is one of the biggest pieces of advice, I guess, for people that have newly experienced stroke, is that hanging on to or aiming to get back to that person feels right at the time because that's the only reference point you have, but
Mm.
it's actually can be really detrimental too, because that's when you find that you're not necessarily being gentle and compassionate with yourself. That's where the frustration comes from, because you're continually trying to live up to this version that doesn't exist anymore. And even if you hadn't had a stroke, that version doesn't exist anymore. So my advice, I guess, and my definition of full recovery for me is I feel fully recovered because despite the symptoms and the side effects and all that sort of stuff that I'm still experiencing, because I've learned to live a fulfilled life with the abilities that I have left.
Love that outlook. Yeah,
And I
that's
think
a great
that
way of describing
it's
it. Mm.
it's a healthier, gentler, more self-compassionate approach to full recovery
Mm.
than than trying to be that person that you once were.
Yeah, love it. So we'll sign off now. But I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stroke experiences from the
Thank you for
scare
having
at the
me.
beginning. Oh, you're welcome. And I just love that your outlook, and you're correct 100% in saying that mindset is everything, and that it is a journey. You don't always start off um, with the gratitude mindset at the beginning.
Mm.
However, over time and through your experiences, you can definitely learn how to count your blessings and appreciate the fact that you are still here, and that you can have a quality of life afterwards.
Yeah, for sure. thank you so much for having me. It's been really, really beautiful to share this with you.
You're welcome.